Hi there, I'm Jeremy Thake and I work in the Microsoft Graph team. I'm super excited to talk about both Microsoft Graph, which is what I work on every day at Redmond, and the dual screen experiences that are available now in the SDKs. The big thing for me is that the fact that you can have so much information and context across those two screens and bringing together the Microsoft Graph information that comes from our products and services that we have with inside of Office 365. So today we're going to show how you can take the data that your users use day to day inside of our products and bring them into custom experiences that you as developers can build to make your users even more productive. So the best way to talk about the Microsoft Graph is the fact that it actually powers our own products. If you're using Microsoft already and you're using things like Microsoft Outlook, when you go in and create a new mail and you click on the to text box, you'll notice that it will come up with a list of recent people that you've operated with. This under the covers is using the Microsoft Graph to serve that up based on people that you message in email in the last few days. But it'll also do some smart things, like as I type Jeremy here, it's going to return not just those recent Jeremys I've worked with, but it's going to work out other suggestions of Jeremys within your organization or within your address book that make sense to show up on that screen. Again, all powered by the Microsoft Graph. Now, this doesn't have to just be inside of Windows on Outlook desktop. It'll work across mobile devices and browsers as well, because the Microsoft Graph is simply just a REST API. And so whether I'm in Microsoft Teams and I'm searching for Jeremy in the top search bar, in the desktop application on the left here, or in the iPhone app here on the right, all of these things are just basically making simple REST calls back to our Graph API. And to expand that even further, simple things like going into a Word document and adding a comment and having an app mention inside of that review comment, it's making that same list of people there, all powered by the Microsoft Graph. Now, this is more than just people. If I'm using OneDrive or I'm hitting the SharePoint homepage here in an organizational view, you'll notice that not only is it showing me recommended files based on what documents people within my organization are working on, it's also showing recent files that I've worked on, which is really like a most recently used view that you see inside of Word. And again, this will show up not only in my browser here, but in my mobile experience. Now, the benefit of this is that you too can use these APIs in your own experiences. And just as a kind of high-level coverage here, I showed you the files experience, but you can get at tasks within To-Do, mail I showed in Outlook, you can get at the contacts that are stored in Outlook, as well as the calendar events and the groups that you're a part of, whether you're a person in an organization or you're a person in your own Outlook.com account. Examples of this, as we mentioned, are things like find all events in my calendar. And from a REST perspective, what that looks like is essentially a get command to graph.microsoft.com on the V1 endpoint as me, as the individual that's signed in to my application, whether it's a mobile app or a web app. And using the select statement here to just get back my events, and it will return the top 10 here with the subject line. Now, this syntax is simple across all the different products we have at Microsoft. So if you want to get to the OneDrive files, you would just do drive/root/children. Or if you wanted to go find the rooms within the buildings that you have access to, it will return through find room lists. So this is super powerful to use. And as a developer, if you use it for one thing, it's very easy to kind of jump in and use it for other products within Microsoft. But I want to kind of explain that it's not just this CRUD, create, read, update, delete process. You can also do this to do things like more intelligent aspects, like find me the OneDrive files that a user attended to Word in the last week, or schedule time for a meeting with a group on their Outlook calendar, or credit to do task for a user based on a Word comment in a document that they own. All these things can be done by taking different assets of what we have inside of our service to make it more productive for your users. Now, the most popular data sets we see our partners use when they're building applications on top of the Microsoft Graph are mail, the conversations in Teams, tasks, updating user profile information, creating documents within OneDrive, and going and scheduling events inside of someone's calendar. These are the most common ones, but the Graph has a vast amount of different other resource types that you can get access to across the different products and services we have within inside of Microsoft. Now, the Microsoft Graph powers experiences that are individually helpful and collectively powerful. And what we mean by that is that you will have your own data and your own value and insights that you can provide the customer. But bringing that alongside our data adds so much value and increases the productivity of the users. Now, the best way to get started with Microsoft Graph is if I just jump over to a browser here and go to graph.microsoft.com. This is our main landing page for the developer portal for Microsoft Graph. And if you just click here on Graph Explorer is our API playground. This gives you the ability here to go and explore the different types of APIs that are available. And if I just zoom in here on the screen, you'll see on the left-hand side, we have some samples that are getting started. If I click on here and go click my profile, you'll see that when I run that, it's going to return all of my profile information here at the bottom, where it's giving me the demo account's display name, their given name, their job title, and even things like if they had a mobile phone and their office location. But I can grab things like their profile photo, which we'll see that most applications want to use, and it saves your application having to store that yourself, so you can just use the graph and get it from the common profile photo for. And I can even get the mail messages here for a user's mailbox. Again, because there's so much access to the graph, we allow users to consent to various permissions when they log into your application to tell that user what your application is going to go and request access to. If the user doesn't consent to those, then the application won't be able to get access to it. So we're on a fine-grained permission list here on how we do things. And so the Graph Explorer is definitely the right place to start to get an understanding of all the different types of things you can go get at the graph with these samples that you can go launch. So I encourage you to go try these in your own time. Now, from a dual screen application aspect, which is why you're here in this developer day, I really wanted to show you an example of an application that takes advantage of all of these things and takes advantage of the fact that we can surface data that's coming from a Microsoft services like To Do in this instance, and bring together other data that's coming from external systems that you would own as a partner. Now, our sample is actually going to be using JavaScript APIs under the covers. But we have the ability with Microsoft Graph, if you're using .NET or you're using Java, or if you're building with mobile devices, we have those SDKs available to you so that you can build your applications very easily against our SDK. The other thing we're going to show you today is our Microsoft Graph Toolkit. This is a collection of framework-agnostic web components powered by the Microsoft Graph. This allows you to do things like sign in very easily as a user, or have a people picker within your experience, or even have a task list very quickly with a few lines of code that handles all the binding back to Microsoft Graph and renders it all on a screen in a way that users will be familiar with because it mimics a lot of the user experience we have within Microsoft. So if I go back over to my demo environment here, a very common scenario is for Microsoft to do is to store a shopping list. Now, I have the ability in To Do to share this shopping list, and me and my wife actually go and during the week we'll add things that we want to go get when we go to the shops, and whether it's me or her going to the shops, we just launch our To Do app and all that list of things is there. Now, a common thing you'll find when you get to the shops is this notion of not knowing where all these things are on the different aisles. And so an idea that I came up with a crew at home in our Redmond offices here is that we have this notion of an app called Contoso Foods. So Nikula Metulev and Shane Weather, who are in the MGT, our Microsoft Graph Toolkit team, kind of went away and built this application based on some ideas we had around Contoso Foods. So all I'm going to simply do here is I'm using the web emulator to show and emulate what you'd see inside of one of those Surface devices. And if I click sign in here, I'm going to sign in as my Outlook.com account. And the first time I do this, essentially what you're going to see is that it's asking me to give permissions to the Contoso Foods premium app to read the tasks within my To Do and also read and update those tasks. So I'm going to click yes there. And as I launch that application now, what it's going to do is it's going to go away and create a bunch of sample tasks on my shopping list if they're not already there inside of my To Do application, and then render that on the screen. Now, the benefit of having that second screen now is if I go and click on some of these things, I can get information about those particular things on my shopping list. So that maybe if my wife wants to critique the fact that I'm having mini bagels, she can go look at the nutritional facts there right in line without having to jump over to a web browser and see that. All in line inside that experience, making the role a lot easier to navigate there. Now, in addition to that, we can even do things like I can add that maybe I want a bunch of additional bananas that I want to go get this week at the store. So I can do that from within the interface. In the background, what that's doing is it's going to go and update my tasks. So if I refresh that screen here and update those tasks, and you'll see now that it will give me a quantity at the beginning of that task list. So not only am I able to read that list through, I can also rewrite back to that list, all from within, staying within this Surface application. Now, where this gets really fun is when I go to actually go shopping, I can go into this view and see the list of them and see the quantities and the price and go get that information from the store data and merge that in with the information I have in my to-do list. And more so, when I go and click on this navigation link here, it'll show me whereabouts in the shopping center in the supermarket that food or beverage or whatever it is in that list is available in the aisle, so it helps me to navigate and go through. Now, if we wanted to get really fancy, we could start to order those tasks, those shopping list items, in a way that makes sense to optimize the way I walk around that supermarket. But for the purpose of the demo today, we're just listing them as they were created inside of To-Do. Now, what this looks like under the covers, if I go to Visual Studio Code, is you would have seen the sign-in button in the top right of my application there. Now, this is the only code I had to put in which uses the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, MGT, to handle that whole sign-in experience. I clicked on that button, it produced a pop-up, I signed in as my Outlook.com account, it showed me the permission consent screen, and then went back and actually showed me the user profile photo and my name based on the profile that's stored that it fetched from Microsoft Graph calls. So it's very, very easy to get started and get the delegated permission of the user and the context of the user within your own application. Now, the other big thing that we did here was when you create the application, we had to specify the scopes that are required. So whether it was task.read and task.read-write, so I could do the pulling the tasks up from To-Do and then signing and updating those quantities. These are the permission scopes that are required. And this is what happens when you sign into this application, is the application provides these scopes up to go get that user's consent. That unique ID is something you have to go create in Azure Active Directory so that our systems know your unique application ID and the consents and keeps a store of who's consented to this application. Now, obviously, the task list in our application was a little bit customized. And so if I just move this to the side here, what you'll see is that we had the simple images, which, again, this is a sample. So we've hard-coded these images, but they could be coming to a product database on a CDN or so forth if this was a full-blown application. And you'll also see here on we're just basically binding using the templating syntax, the title of the actual task, and then we're using things like the price and the strike price from the system to understand and merge that data together from the graph and from the external system of this Contoso Foods application. So it's super easy to override the templates that we provide out of the box. And then lastly, as I mentioned at the beginning, the first time you onboard into this application, we need to make sure you have the shopping list within your To-Do app. And so in this instance, although the MGT controls like the to-do list and like the sign-in list will actually kind of handle the binding for you, you also have the ability to go get the back-end graph client, which means that you can make calls to go get the task folders and bring back the task ID name and the task folder name itself. And then if the shopping list doesn't exist, we can actually just use a simple post command to go create that folder. And then based on an array of different items, we can then go and use a post against the task items to go add all those tasks into that particular folder based on the folder ID of what was created in that last step. So it's super straightforward to not only just take advantage of MGT Toolkit to essentially put controls on the page in a few lines of code, but also to use our client to do even more complex things against our API that we showed in the Graph Playground that we can do very simply in this API and handling the versions and whether it's a get or a post. So hopefully this gives you a good idea. And for more information, if you go to graph.microsoft.com and click on Docs here, and if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there's a Use the Toolkit. And when I launch on Use the Toolkit, you'll see that we have a lot of information about how to get started, how you need to bring in the MGT loaded JavaScript to have all this magic within your application, and getting started with this MGT-login we showed in our particular application. What I will say though is we have this great little tool called MGT-.dev, which allows you to go and experiment with these tools. So you can see here that not only do we have the MGT tasks list here that will go through and show what our standard task lists look like that we, in a custom template, changed as part of that Surface app, Contoso Foods, but that we also have things like getting meeting agendas from people's calendar, and this look and feel is very similar to what you would see in the Outlook web user experience. And for instance, if I go into the login, you can see here that we can play with these controls and see exactly what can be seen within these experiences. Now, if I go to tasks here and have a look, I have the ability to see that in this instance, I'm seeing the add button and the assign to me titles, but I can do things like play with the properties of the web component to hide those things and see what that looks like without even taking that into my application. So this is a great way of getting to understand what components are available and how you can use these things inside your own applications. So I'm hoping that's got you really excited about going and building these experiences inside of these dual screen emulators using the SDKs. And you can get started with that today at aka.ms/dual screen. Now, to go look at the stuff we do within engineering on Microsoft Graph, the best place to start is graph.microsoft.com. This will get you started. You can jump into Graph Explorer and look at the API playground and experience and experiment with all the different APIs that are available. And then we've actually open sourced this Contoso Foods application. So if you go to aka.ms/contoso-foods, you'll be able to go clone this repo down and get it started. All you'll need is an outlook.com account, which you can get for free on Microsoft.com. And we'll even provision those shopping lists within your to-do app and put those task list items in there so you can get started and see a fully fledged experience working within that emulator in minutes. So thanks very much for your time today, and I hope to see what you're building in the future.